This is a recording of the presentation that will be given at the public hearings on Lobster Draft Addendum 29 and Jonah Crab Draft Addendum 4, which consider electronic vessel tracking in the federal lobster and Jonah crab fisheries. In this presentation, we'll start off with an overview of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the timeline for the development of this addendum, then review the problem statement and addendum objective, go over the proposed management options, and wrap up with instructions for providing public comment. For some background, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission was formed in 1942, and it is comprised of the 15 states on the Atlantic coast. The states of Maine through Virginia participate in the management of American lobster and Jonah crab. The Atlantic Coastal Fisheries Cooperative Management Act charges the Commission to create fishery management plans to provide for the conservation of coastal fishery resources. Through this act, the Commission has regulatory authority in state waters. The board works through quarterly meetings where each state is represented by 3 commissioners and each state gets 1 vote in the decision-making process. Addendum 29 and 4 for lobster and Jonah crab, respectively, were initiated in August of 2021. In December of 2021, the board approved the draft addendum document for public comment. The public comment period is ongoing now through the end of January 2022 and will include 6 virtual public hearings. All public comments must be submitted by 5 p.m. on January 31st, 2022. The board is expected to consider public comments and take final action on the addendum in February or early March of 2022. The board initiated draft addendum 29 to consider vessel tracking requirements for federally permitted lobster and Jonah crab vessels. The board has recognized the critical need for high-resolution spatial and temporal data to characterize effort in the federal lobster and Jonah crab fisheries for several years prior to initiating this action. In particular, several issues affecting the fishery pose a need for these effort data, including stock assessment limitations, fishery interactions with protected resources, marine spatial planning for other ocean uses, and law enforcement challenges. The stock assessment for American lobster would be improved with higher resolution spatial data on the lobster fishery from electronic vessel tracking. Specifically, tracking data would allow for effort to be more accurately assigned to the stock units and would also improve the resolution of size composition data, which in turn would improve the accuracy of stock assessment models that estimate abundance and exploitation of the stocks. Another current issue for the lobster and Jonah crab fisheries is the interaction of the fishery with protected marine resources such as the North Atlantic right whale. NOAA Fisheries is responsible for implementing the Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Plan, which aims to reduce the risk of mortality and serious injury to whales in the commercial lobster and Jonah crab pot fisheries. The Take Reduction Plan includes requirements for the lobster and Jonah crab fisheries, such as reductions in the number of vertical buoy lines in the water, weak rope requirements, and seasonal restricted areas, which are expected to have substantial economic impacts on the fishing industry. And as part of this plan, there may be additional requirements for risk reduction starting in 2025. Without higher resolution data, the additional reductions would be calculated based on the current models of the number and locations of vertical buoy lines. But with the data provided by electronic vessel tracking for federally permitted vessels, the models and estimates could be significantly improved. Therefore, it's critical to gather updated and enhanced spatial effort data to improve the risk reduction models ahead of this timeline. Marine spatial planning for other ocean uses is another management challenge on the horizon for lobster and Jonah crab fisheries. Emerging ocean uses such as aquaculture, marine protected areas, and offshore energy development could compete with fisheries for ocean space, and as spatial allocation discussions occur, it will be important to understand the footprint of the U.S. lobster fishery in order to protect important fishing grounds. For an example, during the development of the New England Fishery Management Council's Omnibus Deep Sea Coral Amendment, which looked to provide protection to corals in the Northwest Atlantic Ocean, estimating the economic impacts to the lobster fishery was a big challenge due to the lack of fine-scale spatial information on lobster and Jonah crab catch in the areas that were being considered for protection. Similar challenges occurred when the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument was established in 2016, and it's expected that these challenges will continue given increased activity surrounding offshore wind development, aquaculture, and oil and gas exploration, as well as a recent executive order that included a goal of protecting 30% of U.S. waters by 2030. Another potential benefit of collecting electronic vessel tracking data is the ability to improve enforcement in the offshore area. The large geographic range and the low density of lobster gear in the offshore federal fishery makes it challenging for enforcement officers to locate gear for compliance checks. More precise information on fishing locations from tracking data would improve the efficiency and capability of offshore enforcement efforts. Considering all of these challenges, the objective for this addendum is to collect high-resolution spatial and temporal data to characterize effort in the federal American lobster and Jonah crab fisheries for management and enforcement needs. There are just two management options being considered in Draft Addendum 29. Option A is status quo or no additional requirements for electronic vessel tracking in the lobster and Jonah crab fisheries. Option B is to implement electronic tracking requirements for federally permitted lobster and Jonah crab vessels with commercial trap gear area permits. If option B is selected, federal lobster and Jonah crab vessels that are issued commercial trap gear area permits would be required to install an approved electronic tracking device to collect and transmit spatial data in order to participate in the trap gear fishery. This means any federally permitted vessel without an approved electronic tracking device is prohibited from landing lobster or Jonah crab taken with trap gear. Therefore, federal permit holders would have to install and activate an approved device before beginning a lobster or Jonah crab fishing trip with trap gear. The device would be required to stay on board the vessel and have power at all times when the vessel is in the water, unless the device is authorized to power down by the principal port state listed on the federal permit. Powering down could be authorized for reasons such as a vessel being hauled out for repairs or if a device failure has been reported to the state authority. Tampering with the tracking device or signal, including any activity that could affect the unit's ability to operate properly, would be prohibited. The tracking requirements under option B would apply to the 7 federal permit categories shown in this table. These include all of the commercial trap gear area permits for areas 1 through 5 and Outer Cape Cod, as well as the commercial trap gear area 5 waiver permit, which allows area 5 permit holders to be exempt from the more restrictive lobster trap gear specifications and trap tagging requirements in order to target black sea bass with unbaited lobster traps. Commercial trap gear area 6 is excluded from the proposed electronic tracking requirements because area 6 is in state waters only. This is a brief flowchart for understanding whether a federally permitted vessel would require an approved electronic tracking device. If the vessel has one of the specified lobster commercial trap gear area permits, the permit has not been placed in confirmation of permit history, and the vessel will fish trap gear at any point in the fishing year, then an approved tracking device is required to be installed before beginning a fishing trip. Beyond the basic tracking requirements, option B in the draft addendum also provides some additional information on how this program would be implemented. First, it specifies the required criteria that devices must meet in order to be approved for use in the fishery. It describes the administrative responsibilities and processes that would be needed at the commission, state, and federal levels. And lastly, it describes how data collected by the tracking devices would be processed, stored, and provided to managers. As mentioned, option B in the draft addendum includes a list of minimum criteria and specifications that must be met by the tracking devices and product vendors for approval for use in the fishery. Some of these are summarized here and more details are included in the addendum document. First, the devices must be capable of collecting location data at 1 ping per minute for at least 90% of the fishing trip. This data collection rate is needed to differentiate fishing activity from transiting activity and to allow the estimation of number of traps per trawl. The data for each ping must include the device's current date time, latitude, longitude, and both a device and vessel identifier. The devices must meet minimum accuracy and precision requirements, as well as ruggedness specifications that allow them to function in the marine environment. And device vendors must maintain the confidentiality of personally identifying information and other protected data in accordance with federal laws. If option B is chosen by the board, the commission, the states, and NOAA fisheries would collaborate to administer the management program. First, the Commission would form a work group to review and approve tracking devices for use in the fishery, and this work group would provide information on approved devices to the states. The states would be responsible for certifying that devices are installed for required permit holders, providing support to permit holders, and data validation and compliance monitoring. At the federal level, NOAA Fisheries would be responsible for processing federal permit and electronic vessel trip report data. The addendum also describes the data processes needed for the electronic tracking program. Foremost, vessel tracking data would be housed by the Atlantic Coastal Cooperative Statistics Program, or ACCSP. ACCSP will receive location data from the tracking vendors and EVTR data from the Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office, and will be able to match vessel tracks with trip reports. ACCSP will maintain data confidentiality in accordance with federal law and allow data access only to authorized entities with confidential access. Regarding trip report data, the state and federal agencies will remain responsible for ensuring compliance with data reporting requirements. The full draft addendum document for draft addendum 29 and 4 can be found on the Commission's website at www.asmfc.org/about-us/public-input. The Commission has scheduled 6 public hearings to gather public input on the draft addendum. If you would like to provide comments, you can attend a virtual public hearing for your state or region. This table provides the dates and times for all of the public hearings scheduled for this action. For more information on attending a public hearing, visit www.asmfc.org/calendar or contact Caitlin Starks, FMP Coordinator, at cstarks@asmfc.org. If you would like to submit written comments on this action, you can send them by mail, email, or fax to the addresses on this slide. Comments can be emailed to comments@asmfc.org using the subject line Lobster Draft Addendum 29. You can mail comments to the Commission's office at the following address: 1050 North Highland Street, Suite 200 A through N, Arlington, Virginia 22201, or you can send comments by fax to 703-842-0741. The deadline for public comments is 5:00 p.m. on January 31st, 2022. Comments received after this time will not be considered by the board.